Hello YouTube, Team Mosin coming at you from the bunker. Sorry it's been so long between videos. It's been a crazy couple months. Good to be back. Coming to you today, I wanted to take the opportunity to answer a few questions that I've received regarding this rifle since we started posting videos in the winter, talking about some of the modifications that had been done to it, taking it out and shooting it. If you missed some of those videos, I'll get some links in the description, and that way you can check all those out. Today what I wanted to do just really quickly was just to kind of address some of the questions that I've received in terms of what modifications I actually did to this rifle. And so this video will be entirely an effort to answer that question. I think those of you who expressed that interest. Again, this is just a Mosin Nagant 9130 run-of-the-mill 1942 Isbek 9130, about as common as it gets. And but I did want to take it and make some modifications to it, and I'll talk a little bit later about how when I first got it, attempted to shoot it as it was with the old ramp iron sights, the old front sight. It wouldn't shoot. It wouldn't group much more 5, 6, 8 inches depending on what variety of ammunition I chose to feed it. It just wouldn't shoot. So I said, well, I'm not a gunsmith by any stretch of the imagination, but whatever I would do to it couldn't make it any worse, and I wasn't really of a mind to pay some gunsmith good money to do things to it, to actually try and fix a Mosin Nagant. So this became kind of like a little hobby project, and in the end it turned out very well. So we'll just kind of get started talking about the things I did. This end, we'll start down here. As you can see, replaced the metal butt pad with a rubber butt pad, and that's really great. Mosin Nagants kind of have a reputation for being heavy recoilers. I don't really find that to be the case so much, but the rubber butt pad certainly helps when you're settling down into a firing position. The rubber, like it does almost any time you put a rubber butt pad on a rifle, it enables you to get a grip, a solid grip against your clothing, your jacket, your shirt, whatever. And it's not sliding around like it does with that metal butt pad, like on a Mosin or a Mauser. And I think that's what happens with so many rifles, even Winchester 30-30. A lot of times you throw that up, and the metal butt plate, you're just not getting it. It's not solid. It's sliding around, and it's not got a good grip, of the stock to you. And so when you shoot it, it slips, and then it whacks you. And that's what really hurts. And it's the same with these. I don't really think they recoil much harder than anything else, but they definitely have the characteristic of causing some pain. There's no doubt about that. And so this rubber butt pad, when I'm shooting it either prone or off the bench or whatever, really enables me to get that stock nestled in there into my shoulder groove, and it really sticks, and it's not going anywhere. And so then when you fire, it's just more of a little push. It's not like it's sliding and whacking you, one way or another, which it definitely contributed to the enjoyability of shooting this rifle. Next thing I did was I glass bedded the entire receiver up into the front of the chamber, clear around the action block and everything. Just got a good old batch of Brownell's Aki glass and went to work. If you're familiar with these rifles at all, you always notice that around the back of the tang here, there's enough space there between the tang and the stock with the inletting that they've done. You could stick a dime in there a lot of the time, and that can't be good for the shooting. So that's also been built up with bedding under and around all of that, and just in an effort to kind of stiffen that up and give the action some consistency from shot to shot. And for the moment, we'll skip over the obvious modification, and we'll move on to the end here. Now, I do shoot this rifle with the upper and lower handguard on it, but I did take it off so that I can kind of talk about some things I did here. In addition to applying the bedding to the action, I also applied the bedding, I don't know if you can see there, to the entire cleaning rod channel, as this runs the whole length. Normally here, where you would have a cleaning rod in there, I filled that all up with glass, because that channel is a good 1/4 inch wide, at least a 1/4 inch deep, and it runs all the way down into the front of the action here under the chamber. And that cleaning rod actually, I believe, screws into some sort of a fixture in there, and so there's a big cut all the way from here all the way out in your stock. And I thought that was kind of detrimental to the stiffness of the stock, so I just filled that whole thing up with glass, and let it set. And I think it seemed to have worked out. The other thing that I did in terms of the stock is I free floated the upper and lower handguard away from the barrel, forward of the chamber, where the glass stops, and then all the way to the end, upper and lower. This is the upper handguard is completely free floated. And then in doing some research online, I found that a lot of guys are saying, well, you want it free floated, but then you want toward the end of the barrel, there should be contact for 3 or 4 inches. And guys, you see guys out there, they're corking them, they're putting wet rags in there, wrapping the barrel, clamping it down with the barrel, or excuse me, with the stock clamps, and to achieve that rigidity in that portion of the barrel and stock relationship that supposedly these rifles are supposed to have. So what I did was I relieved, free floated upper and lower stock, upper and lower handguard all the way to the end, and then applied glass at the prescribed spot for 3 or 4 inches, both in the upper handguard and the lower handguard, so that that's the only place that there is contact, which apparently, from what I read, there's supposed to be contact on these rifles there. Then the other thing I did was, like so many of these old Mosin Nagants from the wartime era, after the Second World War, when they were put into storage, you got to hand it to the Soviets. They're always coming up with ways to make things expedient and cost effective. So many of those rifles, I assume, the reason they did it was that the crowns at the end were dinged up from whatever use, battle, or just from simply using the metal cleaning rods that are supplied with them, and those crowns were ruined. And that definitely created a situation where the accuracy of the rifle would have been compromised. And so what they did was, if you do your reading, what I was able to discover, which anybody that's familiar with these rifles would know, is that they actually took a lot of those old rifles and they didn't rebarrel them. They just simply recrowned them, and they recrowned them in a unique way where they just simply overbored the last 1.5 inches or so of the barrel back underneath the old sight, overbored that out to, I don't know, if this is a 308, maybe they overbored it to 40. I don't know. It definitely was overbored. It was the last 1.5 inches of the barrel was much bigger than the bullet coming out of it. And then they went in and they after they recrowned it, they went in that 1.5 inches or whatever of that overbore, and they internally recrowned that barrel. And I don't know, what sense that makes from a gunsmithing standpoint or an accuracy standpoint. I do know that as a whole, this rifle, as it was with the old iron sights, and shooting whatever ammunition I could get, it wouldn't group. At 100 yards, it was 5-6 inches, sometimes as big as 8 inches, depending on what I was shooting. And everything from old military ball ammunition of a couple different kinds to modern factory ammunition of a couple different kinds just would not shoot for beans. And so, again, I'm thinking, well, I'm not a gunsmith, but I surely can't make this any worse, And so one of the first things I did, I said, well, that situation there with the overbore and the internal crown, again, it's grouping 6, 7, 8 inches. I can't make it any worse. I actually cut that old front sight off cut the barrel off behind the front sight, behind where that old internal recrown. So now that this barrel is actually, specified caliber length the whole way out. Whereas before, the last 1.5 inches was probably at 40 instead of 308. Now it's 308, the whole length of the barrel. Barrel's 1.5 inches or so shorter, and I just simply recrowned it. Again, I'm not a gunsmith, but I can YouTube. And so I just simply recrowned that barrel at the end, and once I got it all put back together with the obvious addition of the extended eye relief scope. This is simply a scope that's made by Hilux. It's a BDC type scope. It's got BDC ashes in it. It's a 2x7. The mount, again, if you're familiar with these rifles at all, as opposed to like the Mausers, who when you knock the rear sight off a Mauser, I don't know what you've got there, but it's very difficult to get any kind of a rear scope base on that Mauser rear scope sight base. Once you knock the rear sight off, the adaptation there is very wonky. With this, God bless the Russians. I mean, geez, the Soviets in the design of this rifle, well, actually I guess it would have been maybe pre-Soviet era in Imperial Russia before the First World War, the rear sight mount was simply mounted on a number 11 dovetail, 11 millimeter dovetail. It's about 3.5 inches long, and so that's standard even for today. You can it's one of the standard dovetails you can come up with, and so that's why the scope base I have. I was so glad to find it. It's actually an air rifle scope base. If you know anything about air rifles, I guess they're kind of tough on scopes, and so the scope bases for air rifles become critical. This is a one-piece number 11 base. It fits right on there without any additional fooling around. It's just got 3 big old screws like you'd normally have on any dovetail fitting when you're putting any rail or any type of scope base onto a dovetail. It normally goes on and clamps on in one way or another with some bolts or screws, and this has got 3 nice big screws. It screws it down very, very solidly, and as I say, it's one piece, so the lower part of the rings is actually part of it's machined all in one piece with the lower rings, the lower half of the rings and the base is all one piece, which is really, really great. And so all you do is you get it on there and you sit your scope down in it, get the eye relief right, cinch down your the top part of your rings, the top half of your rings on the scope, and Bob's your uncle, and off you go. So all of that taken as a whole have improved this rifle to the point where, with the scope, obviously shooting with the scope now, at 100 yards, it now groups about 1.5 inches, and I now shoot it in the CMP vintage sniper matches, vintage team sniper matches that they hold locally, which you shoot at 300 and 600 yards, and this rifle holds its own with anything that comes to those matches. It shoots extremely well. Well, I'm able to shoot it extremely well at 300 yards. I think the last match it was you get 10 shots and you're shooting at a 10 ring. All of my impacts, I had 1 8 and the rest were all 9s and 10s, which is at 300 yards for a rifle that we one time was grouping better part of 6 or 8 inches is pretty remarkable. At 600 yards, I think it's more on me. Some days I shoot it really, really well at that distance, other days maybe not so much, but it certainly keeps them all in the black very easily on the 600 yard target, and I get a fair number of 8s, 9s, and 10s even on that, maybe half of the shots rather than 9 of the shots at 300 yards being a 9 or a 10. Half of the shots maybe at 600 yards are an 8, 9, or 10, which is, that's pretty good, for a rifle. Again, I said, taken as a whole, from this end of the rifle, everything I did up to this end of the rifle, improved the shootability of this rifle and the enjoyment of it. The thing I'm obviously, if you can tell under the lights, most satisfied with on this rifle, I actually refinished it. Stripped off all the old Cosmoline, a couple cans of brake parts cleaner, and a good number of hours, maybe 6 or 10 hours with a heat gun, sucked all the Cosmoline out of it, and then just simply refinished it. And you can see, it's pretty sweet looking for a military stock. I don't know if that's a wartime stock or that was perhaps a stock that was put on after the war. I don't know. It could be either. One of the bizarre things about this particular Mosin is all the serial numbers match on the bolt and the magazine, and everything that's supposed to have a serial number on it. It all matches the rifle. A little bit unusual for a Mosin. I'm not completely convinced that that's actually the case. I don't know if maybe somebody at the time this was imported took the liberty of restamping a few parts to make them all match. I have no way of knowing, but all in all, got this rifle cleaned up really, really well inside and out. Got it looking like a little bit of something, and got a scope on it. And sometimes now it shoots really, really, I'm able to shoot it really well. It shoots well all the time. It's completely dead nuts at 300 yards, and if I do my part, it's more than satisfactory at 600 yards. So those are the things I've done to this rifle. If you have any further questions, please let me know. Put it in the comments. I appreciate all your support, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.